How's it going, darling? Great. Really? Yep. So you're, as they say, kicking back. Oh, yeah, I guess so. Well, it's just I worked pretty hard on the freshman and it came out great. Right. I mean, don't you think it came out great? Oh, yes, darling. It was a triumphant start. Thank you. And now you are here, taking a wee break. Right. Giving yourself a well-deserved pat on the back. Well, resting comfortably on your laurels. I wouldn't say that exactly. Relaxing, reclining, one might say even slumping. Slumping? If the analogy fits. All right, I'll go cover up some more of that bare wood. A double entendre. Really, darling. So sophomoric. Hi everyone, I'm Andy. Welcome to Furniture Fables. As someone in their sophomore year here on YouTube, I can certainly relate to the desire to want to look back over what one has done in one's first year. Maybe take a deep breath, relax, give yourself a mental high five. But careful there, sophomore. Now is definitely not the time to take your foot off the gas and your eye off the ball. There's so much more to learn, create, and do. So sit up straight, sophomores. Because it's your turn in this Furniture Fablers IKEA Hack Design Challenge. When last we left our multi-part IKEA Hack Design Challenge, our little freshman had made quite a debut in her new smart apothecary-style outfit. But as adorable as she was, the rest of the class was getting impatient. So it's time for her to move on over, because there's a new student needing a style tutorial. Let's call this one the sophomore, shall we? Just like her other classmates, she is a solid pine 3-drawer mini chest or dresser made by IKEA that I was able to purchase used for $10. This one was in good shape with just a little bit of discoloration on the drawer fronts, perhaps from the sun. And so, while the freshmen and the other classmates looked on, I began. I started out by giving the sophomore a quick clean, inside and out, with some water and some simple green. Then I decided to do the same addition to the base of the piece as I did with the freshman. I measured the width of that front bracing bar, and then I cut down a piece of scrap pine to that measurement and mounted it into the back of the dresser using some screws. I pried off the little plastic IKEA
bottom guards, and then I got out the feet that I was hoping to use. I wasn't sure how these feet would look if I used the same technique as I did with the freshmen to build up the foot base, and so I turned the dresser upside down and placed the feet approximately where they would sit. And then I took a picture of the chest upside down, and then I flipped it in my photo editor so that I could study it. You may also remember that I chose to move that front base bracing bar forward when I worked on the freshman. I really didn't want to do that with this one though. With the design I had in mind, I thought that backset bar would actually read quite nicely. But these feet, sitting as they were not really working for me at all. So I grabbed a nice big wide slab of pine that we just happened to have laying around, and I measured off the ends just sitting on top of the piece. And then I cut that down using my chop saw. And then I screwed that into the base, being careful to avoid those pre-drilled factory holes. All right, now that I had our base figured out, I removed the 3 drawers and the little solid pine pulls. Pulls? Where we're going, we don't need pulls. Ooh, I should go get that. Such a goody two-shoes. Okay, I think this sophomore should just go ahead and embrace her laid-back attitude, and nothing says effortlessly cool more than the natural look of caned drawers. Now, I have seen folks do a DIY caned look on drawer fronts in a few different ways. Sometimes they will cut out the center of the drawer and will apply the caning to the back. Sometimes they will keep those drawer fronts intact and apply the caning directly over the wood. But I think I kind of want the best of both of those worlds. And of course, I will show you what I mean. I carefully measured out the section I wanted to remove, making sure I wasn't going to run into the drawer's bottom panel. You can see I obviously have a rectangle here. I'm actually going to go ahead and round my corners because I think it will make it easier when I'm making my cuts. I made myself a starter hole with that big drill bit, and then using my reciprocating saw, I cut out that center section. Now, this is not going to create beautifully perfect straight lines, but with the way I'm approaching this caned drawer feature, it's not going to matter. So, hey, good news. If you do want those lines to be perfect, which you probably would if you were going to place the caning behind the drawer, you would need to probably clamp something to your drawer so that it would act as a straight edge guide for your saw. By the way, those jerking movements that you're seeing are me blowing away the sawdust so that I can see my pencil line. This is dusty work. Okay, I gave those cut out borders a little bit of a sanding just in case someone's hand might somehow touch them, even though I don't think that they will. And then I used a little bit of wood filler to fill those IKEA screws, which have those really deep divots, and also to go over the screws that I had added. I also went ahead and filled in the small crack between the original piece and that new base piece. After that dried, I sanded it all back. I also hit some dings I found, and as per usual, I found a couple other things that needed filling. This big knot hole here has quite a big divot, and I also found a little scratch up here on this side edge that I filled as well. All right, let's meet the laid-back star of this fable. This here is a 3-foot roll of natural cane webbing. You can order this material through Amazon. I'll include a link in the description box. And, you know, it used to be kind of harder to get a hold of, but now it seems much more readily available, if not a tiny bit pricey. I am soaking mine for about 30 minutes as per the instructions, and I think I'll also straighten it out with some bottles of Simple Green that I'll weigh it down with. Maybe I'll just get into the water. It was a very hot day. Okay, so using the drawer, I measured where to cut the caning, and then I cut out the 3 pieces I was going to need while they were still damp. And while they were still damp, I stapled them onto the face of the drawers. I stopped my stapling at one point to check for level. That's because placing webbing with this pattern, placing it straight, is actually a tad challenging. The caning itself, of course, has flex and, you know, it has differences throughout it. And my cuts on the drawer, of course, were not perfect. So this was smart to stop and just double check. Everything looked pretty good, so I finished off that last drawer, and then I went to make my trim pieces. I am using a very basic, very plain pine lattice trim. Whenever I cut something this thin, my husband always reminds me to go slow. And of course, he is correct. That way you are much less likely to chip the trim. When I was a sophomore and starting to learn to drive, my dad would joke with me and my 2 other sisters when they were learning to drive that, you know, if you're driving and you see a situation where maybe it looks a little dangerous, you're not sure what to do, just get your speed up. That way you get through the situation faster. That was his, you know, hyperbolic dad humor kind of way of trying to express to us to drive slowly. I don't know how we all survived. Okay. Teenage drivers. All right. Once I had all of my pieces trimmed and mitered, I applied a good amount of glue and I placed all of the pieces. You really want to have a plethora of clamps when you are doing this. I really didn't want to deal with sinking covered little nail heads, but you could absolutely use them to help keep your pieces in place as that glue dries. Okay, once that had all dried, I used more wood filler to fill the miter cracks. And I also added some into the crack between the front of the drawer and the new trim. Time to sand again. I cleaned up the drawers and I also hit that knot in the corner as well as the scratch. And then I also went ahead and sanded the top of the piece. One thing about unfinished wood pieces like these IKEA pieces is that wood is completely unprotected, and so dirt and grime can really saturate and sink in to the fibers of the wood and may not come off when you do your initial cleaning. So planning on a little cleanup sanding is probably a good idea. All right, then I got out this lovely, gorgeous neutral color called Algonquin by Fusion. Given that it was about 100 degrees out, I was very glad to have some extender to add. This will slow the drying time a little bit and give me a little help as I work in this heat. You may notice I am not doing something that I usually do, which is, of course, priming. I've worked with Fusion before over pine, and while past experiences are not guarantees with paint, wood and paint can be kind of like people, a little temperamental, a little unpredictable. Still, I felt pretty confident that I wouldn't have bleed through, and so I just went for it. Unlike the freshman, this time I remembered to remove the plastic drawer slides, and then I taped up the inside so that everything would be nice and tidy. So as I paint the top here, you'll notice that I start in the center, then fan the paint out to the sides, making sure to get the paint into those side edge cracks. Then I finish with long, unbroken strokes, and I make myself stop and leave the paint alone. Yes, it looks streaky and weird. Just leave it be. Don't touch it. It's going to level out and look great. Okay, while that first coat dried, I actually placed the dresser on its back and I looked at where I wanted to put our feet. Placing feet is, of course, really a matter of taste. I find that when I see these slanted, modernist feet, my eye kind of likes it when the edge of the toes of the foot line up with the outer edge of the dresser. I made some measurements and then I got out my drill, remembering this time to put the piece on the floor upside down because you will always have a better result when you drill if you're standing over whatever you are drilling into. I actually started with a smaller bit and then worked up to the big honking granddaddy one. And, and lo and behold, even with all of that measuring, I made a mistake. I realized I had my forward feet too far forward. It wasn't going to look good. And actually, it was going to almost run into that front bracing bar. Ugh. So aggravating. Can I please blame that on the heat? It was difficult to think. I remeasured and then I finished installing those foot mounts and then I screwed those feet in. You kind of have to play with slanted feet so that they are leaning in the direction that you like. looks good. Okay, yep, there was a teeny tiny hole from my ridiculous drilling, and it was barely visible, but I went ahead and I added some filler. So at this point, I decided to put the drawers in and stand back and take a look at things. And that's when I had an idea, friends. You know, I often do this design on the fly, and I was looking down at that front horizontal bar, and a little bit of inspiration struck. I put the piece on its back again, and I used my more burly Festool sander to take off that fusion paint along that bar. So what I'd like to do is create a stencil, essentially, of the caning pattern. I left that middle drawer in the piece so I could look up at it for a reference. And then using my most skinny frog tape, 1/4 of an inch wide, I began to map out the wicker pattern. First, I created 2 double horizontal lines, and then I found the center of that bar and created a double lined square right in the center. Kind of see where I'm going here? What do you think? Then, using my tape guides, I continued making those squares until I had done that whole bar. Then I did my diagonal lines, paying attention really closely to the little triangles that those diagonal lines were creating in the corners of my squares. That I found was the easiest way for me to keep things even. It's those little corner triangles. Okay, once my entire pattern was taped, I burnished it really, really well, pushing down on all of those little thin lines. And then I applied a layer of flat top coat. This is a really important step when you are trying to get clean stencil lines, especially if you are working with tape this thin. While that top coat dried, I got out some stain and finishing oil by Fusion in the color Natural, and I hit all of the drawer trim, including the tops and the sides. After that had sat and soaked in for a good 15 minutes, I wiped it back with a lint-free cloth. Okay, time to paint our stencil. I gave my brush a light misting with some water, and then I wiped it back. I didn't want it wet, I just wanted it a little bit damp. And then I applied the paint very, very carefully using vertical strokes. As I went, I got up really close with my eyes to make sure that I was getting into all those little exposed areas of the stencil. Once that had dried, I did a second coat, this time using horizontal strokes, hoping that that would really ensure that all of the stencil would be evenly covered. Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've been waiting for. Let's peel the tape. Is there anything more fun than this? I don't know. I'm a tape peeling geek, friends. Now, some folks like to remove tape once the paint has dried. I tend to do it while it is still wet. Either way, you want to do it with some care so as not to disturb the paint that you are leaving behind. This is getting interesting. Go the horizontal ones. Oh, so dramatic. Effortlessly cool takes a lot of effort. That's a lot of tape. Okay, I did a second coat of Algonquin all over the body of the piece. And after that had dried, I came back and I did what is often referred to as a half coat. Because of the heat, I gave myself some extra brush stroke protection by spraying down my brush and then using my misting bottle to mist the top with water. The net effect is that the paint goes on much less than full strength, and it really helps your paint to glide on, especially in weather like this. Here you can see with this time lapse how that paint smooths out and levels as it dries. I chose 3 modern pulls for the drawers that wouldn't steal any of the thunder from those caned fronts. I'll show you those at the end. And after the stenciled paint had had a good amount of dry time, I actually went over it with some more of the stain and finishing oil so that those exposed wood lines would be sealed and they would be the same soft, warm shade as the drawer trim. And then I let everything dry overnight. Okay, do you remember our so-so sophomore? Seriously lacking in style, with some second-year sadness? Well, here she is now. Sophomore slump? I think not. In her sophisticated neutral coat, she seems quite ready for school. Her modernist feet give her some respectable height, while her one-of-a-kind stencil speaks to the mathematical beauty of her show-stopping drawer fronts. With modern pulls that almost disappear, her unobscured rattan gives her the perfectly relaxed vibe only a sophomore can pull off. Look out, upperclassmen. Our second-year student is on the rise.
So how much did our sophisticated second year cost to create? Well, that IKEA dresser was of course just $10. The 6-inch slanted solid wood feet were $25. The pulls were only $10. The caned webbing was $60 for the 2 rolls that I needed. $7 for paint, frog tape, rags, sanding pads, etc. Another $5. I kind of lucked out with the trim. We had it here and it has been here for so long, I'm just gonna pretend that it was free, which brings my total out-of-pocket cost to $117. This girl has expensive taste. I can respect that. Now, obviously that cane webbing is a game changer in terms of a cost, but it's also kind of a game changer in terms of the style. And if you are game for the DIY of it all, you can really get an amazingly awesome look for a bargain compared to what you might pay brand new. So what will I list our super cool, relaxed, untroubled sophomore for? Well, I think she can go hang out with our freshman friend. Yes, you can, sophomore. Hang out with the freshmen, you're fine. While I think that over, and also while I get ready to tackle the big guns. I hope that you enjoyed this continuing scholastically inspired IKEA hack design challenge fable. If so, please give me a thumbs up and also leave a note in my locker. Let me know. What did you think? And also make sure to hit that subscribe button so you're in the loop and in the know, because I know you want to know what's gonna happen with the big kids. Can you even believe what they said? Thank you so much for joining me, my friends. I will see you next class period for more Furniture Fables.